Hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you are here. Thank you to all of our guests that are here. We love you. We thank you. And I appreciate that you've taken your time to be here today. My name is Thomas, and my wife, Leilani, and I, and our family, the great privilege of pastoring and leading this church and serving alongside you and so many great people. Thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for all that you do. You're giving to those who were greeting from the front doors, taking care of our kids, this wonderful worship team. All of you, thank you. Why don't we give them a hand? And none of this happens. None of this happens by accident. None of this happens. We don't just show up here. Somebody prepped this place, got everything ready, has been working here, and then somebody takes care of paying for it and responsible for all that has to happen. And that's because of you, because of your giving. And so thank you so very much. And it's been a wonderful time. I hope your Christmas was awesome. I told my wife a couple of times, I told several people already this morning, it really is the best Christmas I can remember. It just seems to keep getting better and better. God has been really good to us. It's not about stuff. It's not about more stuff. And it's just the feeling. It's the atmosphere. It's what I believe God is doing. I'm excited about that. Let me make a couple of announcements to you today. Really, I think I'm going to make two in particular, but we are starting a Wednesday worship, first Wednesday worship, just the first Wednesday of the month at our Lafourche location. So some of you that are new, or maybe you're a first-time guest here today, we have a second location, and we have a service at 1 o'clock on Sundays in Raceland. And so there's a group of us that leave from here and go there. And I'll go ahead. We have a guest speaker today, so I don't want to take his time. But boy, I got some great news to share with you, be sharing with you over the next few weeks. It's awesome. But we did take out a construction loan on that property. And so we're about to get started. I want to tell you this really miraculous story real quick. So there's some foundation issues on that building. In fact, the whole front corner of the building is sinking, and there's a massive crack across the slab, and pretty bothersome. But you know what? We have a building. We have a couple acres of property there that's debt-free, and so we know this is a great investment. And so I called last year. I called a foundation company. A guy came out, and this is what he said. He's driving down the street. The church there sits at the end of a neighborhood, the back of a neighborhood, straight down the middle of the street. Anyway, so he's driving down the street. I'm waiting on him. He gets there. He gets out of his truck, comes over, and he says, "Pastor Thomas?" I said, "Yes, it's me." And he said, "God spoke to me as I was driving down the street and told me that I'm to help you." And right then, he just grabs me and says, "I want to pray for you." Now, I've never met this person before, and so he just grabs my hand and he prays for me, and I just knew this was God. Well, he gives us an estimate, and it was such an amazing number because I had no idea. I have one close person that I'm connected to that had their house raised right here in Destrehan, cost $110,000, and I know we're not doing that whole thing, but anyways, I was just expecting this massive number, and so I knew. He gave us a quote, I'm just going to say it, $5,600. And I was thinking, wow, that's so amazing. They're going to pick up the slab, they're not picking up the whole building, just fixing the brokenness, all of that. And so I said, man, that's awesome. But there was a lot of stuff. The building wasn't in our name yet. There was a lot of things that title work had to be done. And so we didn't do it in that moment. And we just kind of waited. Here we are a year later. And during this season, 2020 comes. And it's been a massive change in everything, having church, the giving, all of those things. And so I said, man, I was really kind of concerned. So now we're ready to do this, and we have 3 companies come out, and so that man comes back, but the price is double what it was. And then another company comes out, and theirs is about 3 times more than that. And so then I'm on the phone. I did mention this a couple of weeks ago. So I'm calling another company, and I call this company, and the lady's on the phone. She just takes my information. This is what she said. So she's in Metairie, Kenner, somewhere in their office. And I said, so she said, "What's the address?" So 349 Central Lafourche Drive, Raceland. She says, "Is that little church in the back of the street?" I said, I'm on the phone with her. I know we're live stream right now, but her name was Sherilyn. I said, "Sherilyn, How do you know that? You know, I'm excited. I'm easily excitable, by the way. And so, especially when it comes to this. And so anyways, I said, how do you know that? She said, I went to church there back in the 80s. And she starts naming all this stuff. I was like, oh, I need to talk to you. I need to know some of the history of this church. And so anyway, so we're having this conversation. And she says, hey, well, the owners of this business were missionaries. And I'm just telling you, it's just going to be good for you, whatever. So she lines me up with a salesperson. This was last week. She calls me back and she says, hey, your salesperson can't come, but the owner of the company who was a missionary is going to come. He's in retirement, but we pulled him out to come and meet you and to do this job. And so literally I meet with that man this week, and they're doing more work than the original quotes that we were given. And he just tells me the same thing. He said, we're going to help you. And he gives me the quote, and it was $5,600. So, yeah. So over the course of the last year, I'm just going to tell you, I've repented. I felt like I told God, I said, God, I feel like I missed an opportunity you gave us. Just went through all these scenarios in my mind as to why I didn't do it then. But here we are today. And here's the point, is that God honors his word. And listen to me, that's not for me. This is for you. This is for us. This is a miracle that God is doing. And so it's just amazing. We're excited about that. So the point, all of that was that we have another church, and it's amazing, and God's doing great things. We've got lots of remodel stuff to do around here as well. We just got a great year coming, and I'm excited. And so I hope that you'll be a part of it. You'll buy in and let God use you to do what you can do. And so with that said, we're gonna start our year. So we have a first Wednesday service over there, and we have prayer here. This is my real announcement today, is we're gonna start off our year with a fast, and I'll make it quick because we have one more Sunday to talk about it. And so those of you who are not familiar with a fast is, when the doctor tells you can't eat after midnight, before you check up, or 8 o'clock or whatever. You're hoping he says midnight, not 8. But anyway, so fasting is just simply going without food. But it's a biblical principle, and it may sound very extreme to some of you if you've not been around church very much, but this church was founded on that, and this is all we know how to do is pray and fast and seek God and try our best, and that's what we're doing. And so we're going to take the first 21 days, but we're actually going to start on the 4th. Personally, I'm going to start on the 1st because I'm committing from day one to this to God. But as a church, from the 4th through the 24th, that's next Monday after New Year's, and we're going to fast. So I'm asking you, as a church, to just choose something. Most people can't fast full food for 21 days. I understand that. Well, you probably could, but you'd probably die trying to think about it. And but here's the point. Some of us will. There will be some of us who are fasting full food for those 21 days. But here's the point. I'm asking you is just ask God to commit something. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, something. During that time, as Americans, we figured out all kind of ways to fast, like Facebook and all that stuff. You should do that anyways, just because it'd be good for your spirit. But here's the point. If you'll commit something every day, we're going to open the church every day during the week for prayer. That's our intent. Every evening, we're going to have the church open. There will be somebody here to lead in prayer. And so we just want this to be a great time. Anybody want your life to be different? Do you want God to do some miracles in your life? Well, how are they going to happen? It's not magic. It's our pursuit of God, and God answers back. And this is one of the most profound ways that can happen in your life. I got to stop. It's 10:38 already. We have a guest speaker. So a few weeks ago, some of you were here, and Pastor Dwayne Parker was here, preached at a great service, a great day. At least 4 people that we know of received the Holy Spirit, spoke in tongues for the first time. That's an amazing experience. And his son-in-law and daughter, one of his daughters, Angela and Zack, were here with him, and they were on staff at a church in home. I believe they were worship pastors over there and just leaders there in the church. And they're in a transition. They're actually at home with her dad and father-in-law, and I know that's going well. And I believe God's orchestrating some greatness in their lives. And I've only met Zack. I literally met Zack a few weeks ago. I've only talked to him twice, but I felt in my spirit to have him preach today, and I'm glad that he's here. And so, would you help me and welcome Pastor Zack Whitehead to preach to us today?
Man, you guys have a fantastic team. Come on, give it up for your pastor. Isn't Pastor Tommy awesome? Everything. You guys have an amazing team. Let us in worship. This building looks fantastic, but all of that comes at the price of vision, and I understand that. Well, we got to talking 2 weeks ago, like you said. A couple weeks ago, and just talked a couple times since. But I remember Pastor Tommy before he was pastor here. He was a sectional youth director, and so I remember going to youth camps, and I remember interning. I'm seeing him all the time and all that kind of stuff. So I remember being like 13, 14, 15, and then I'm 27 now, and just caught up with him. So it's really cool how God brings all that together. I want to let you guys know that I'm super excited about being here. When he called me last week, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, I'll do it. And then as soon as I got off the phone, I'm like, God, what do you want me to say? Like, what do you want me to do? And we were in Tennessee visiting my family, and I was driving home, and I just felt like God put this one statement on my mind: from why to what? From why to what? And I was like, okay, God, that's cool. It's a really catchy phrase, right? Where are we going with this? And just one passage of Scripture came to mind, and I'm going to do a lot of reading today. Some of it I'll paraphrase, and we're going to get through. But we're going to talk about the story of Lazarus today. Some of you guys know this story. If you don't, I promise I'll catch you up with it. But in John 11, I like this rendition of it, the way the writer John talks about it. He said in John 11, starting at verse 1, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. And so they're pointing this out, and this happens in the next chapter. This is the Mary who later poured out the expensive perfume of the Lord on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. And so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. So Lazarus is actually a friend of Jesus. Mary and Martha are friends of Jesus. They're all pals. And this is what happens. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, his sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So although Jesus, he loved, so we see again how personal this is for him. Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He stayed where he was for the next 2 days. He stayed where he was for the next 2 days. To me, the start of this story is a little scary. It's Jesus. He heals people. He preaches to people. He teaches to people. And then the people who the Bible actually calls some of his personal friends and expresses it over many verses, finds out he's sick, and he's like, nah, he can wait. That's okay. How many of you would be really happy with Jesus if he did that to you? Probably not. Probably not. Jesus, what are you doing? You got to do something about this. I'm going to skip down to we're going to pick up in verse 11, and then because Jesus says some stuff to his disciples there, but we're gonna pick up in verse 11, and he says this, and our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go wake him up. And so the disciples took this at his word. They took it literally. The disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll soon get better. That's what we're supposed to do. When we get sick, our bodies sleep. And when we sleep, we get better. Well, the disciples, way over their head. I don't know if you guys ever read the Bible. The disciples are some pretty dense dudes. Jesus says a lot of stuff, and it's just woof. And then he has to go back and explain it. He tells a parable, and Jesus lays it out. And they're like, what you talking about, Jesus? And then he goes back and he explains it again. So again, this is another one of those moments. So they thought Jesus was. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus has died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus, he's dead. If you didn't get it the first time the way I said it, your boy's dead. And for your sakes, talking to his disciples, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. Wow. Goes from, okay, my friend's sick, he's dead, and for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there. To me, at first, this doesn't sound like the Jesus we know and love. And so there's got to be something in this story. There's got to be something more that Jesus is trying to point us to. And so he says, I'm glad I wasn't there for now. Again, dense disciples. For now, you will really believe. Come, let's go and see him. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, again, these dense disciples still don't get it. Let's go to and die with Jesus. We already know the end of the story. This Jesus isn't dying at this point. We know he does eventually, but Thomas, you get what I'm saying? Sometimes when God speaks to us, we don't exactly get it. Sometimes when we ask God why, and even though he tells us why, it still goes over our head. So, and how many of us have been there where we just are certain points in our life, and when life happens, and life, especially in 2020, happens, and we're like, why God? And I believe many times he answers us, but we don't understand the why. God's ways are so much higher than ours. We have to realize that, yes, we matter to God. God died for us personally, but he died for the world. So he's got a lot going on. And he's working so many different angles and so many different things. You ever looked at a picture from like the outside, and then you got really close, like on your TV screen, and you go up to it and go up to it, and finally when you get close enough, you start to see the little squares, the little pixels? That's what we're like sometimes. God is looking at this grand, big picture, and we're so caught up in our situation and our story, our nose is to the picture, and we can only see this moment when God is working on every part of it. God has been the same from the beginning to now and to the end, and he works in all aspects of time. God is eternal. We're only finite. And sometimes we're so caught up in the asking why that we miss what God is trying to do, what God is trying to do in our lives, what God is trying to do in our churches, what God is trying to do in our families, what God is trying to do in our schools and at our workplace. God is trying to reach us. God is trying to show us that he created us for a greater purpose, and everything that happens in our lives. I remember the word says he works out all things for good for those that love him. I don't know who this is for this morning. I have wrestled with this all week. But God, you've been asking him why, but he's trying to show you what. He's trying to show you what. Here's what can happen with asking why. Like I said, if you ask God why, there's so many times he'll tell you. So many times. He shows it to the disciples. My prayer life, I know it's happened before. He explained about it. Here's what happens if we get caught up on why. When we get caught up in why. Any of you guys have kids? My kid's almost to the stage where he's learned the word why. He's almost 2. And so I know it's coming. I have a little brother and a little sister that are 12 and 6, so I remember vividly. Why? Oftentimes we're like that with God, aren't we? Like, why God? Why this? Why that? Okay, why? So why that? Why? When we get to a certain place and plate and why, we begin to question God's authority. God's working on it. Sometimes the first time we ask why needs to be the only time. Because if we get hung up on why, we start to play God in our situations. We start to play God because we're trying to figure out, okay, God, if this isn't happening, how do I make it happen? Maybe God doesn't want you to make it happen. Maybe he's trying to show you that he can provide, that his hand is greater than your hand. I'm telling you, this year has been a year for me and my family. I know it's been for everybody. I know it has been for everybody. That's why I'm talking personally. This year has been a year for me and my family. And I'm preaching to myself this morning almost as much as I'm preaching to you. I have asked God why so many times until finally I hit my knees in my bedroom and I said, okay, God, I give up what? What are you trying to show me? And so many times we get hung up in the why. And I was killing myself to provide for my family and do these things, a lot of transitions and a lot of changes. And what God was trying to show me is not how to do things, but just in me. And I'll show you that my hand is greater than a hand that can sign a paycheck for you. I'll show you that I can provide where you can't provide and what you can't do. Watch this. I got to a car accident. Was it in 2018, babe? It was in 2018. I was driving a student home. And this lady uses us as her brake. Hits us like 55 miles an hour. We're at a dead stop. Crumples the car up. I had to go through, I had to go to the hospital. I had to go do all that stuff. And I was in therapy and everything. And I had to, there's bills to pay and all that kind of stuff. And so we paid this like massive hospital bill. And so I'm going to the mailbox one day. And I don't know if you know this, but like the USPS, if you sign up for it, you can actually see what comes in your mail before it. It's kind of cool. Like I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I get an email and it tells me everything that's going to come in the mail. So I see this thing from Terrebonne General, and I get scared. I'm like, oh man, did I miss another hospital bill? And so I'm expecting a bill, right? I open it up, and it's a check back to us for the amount that we paid. For how many times does that happen that the hospital writes you a check? And it sobered me in that moment, and God said, watch what I can do. Watch what I can do. And what I'm trying to get to, what I'm trying to demonstrate, and what I'm trying to tell you today, and what I'm trying to get to, if you hear anything from me today, let's not get hung up on the why. Let's start asking God what. Let's start asking God what. We're going to skip down to verse 21, and we're going to continue in the story. So where we're at, Jesus has said, nah, I'm not going to see him. Now he's going back. Okay, Lazarus is dead. And so they're at one point, and they're traveling. It's about a 2-day journey. And so Jesus has waited, right? By the time this has happened, it's been 4 days. And Lazarus has been in 4 days. And they don't have morgues like we have morgues. They're in the hot desert sun. So things are starting to stink. And so we skip down to verse 21. And this is the other two characters in the story that we're going to really focus on. And Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like a why, God? Why did you not show up when I expected you to show up? Why did you not turn out and step into my situation when I thought I prayed enough, I thought I lived right enough, I thought I did all the right things, and I lived out the ABCs of Christianity, but you didn't show up, God, and my brother died. Yeah. Why? Why? And then verse 22, but even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. So she comes back with a statement of faith. And this is what Jesus answered her. She says, your brother will rise again. Again, he gave the why. He gave an answer to the why. But watch this. Martha does not understand it. She says, yes, like she does. And she says, he will rise when everyone else rises at that last day. She's talking about the last resurrection. She thinks it's going to be a long time till she sees her brother. But Jesus answers this. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. That anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. And everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she told him, I have always believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. It's a great explanation. She sees it on the surface. She sees the answer to the why on the surface, but she doesn't get it yet. And so she goes back to her sister. She returns to Mary, and she called Mary from the mourners, from the crowd of people that were there mourning the loss of Lazarus. And she says, the teacher is here, and he wants to see you. So Mary goes out and she sees Jesus. And Jesus stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. And this is where all the people were at. They were consoling Mary, and they assumed she was going to Lazarus' graves to weep, but they followed her there for that. A crowd starts to form around Jesus. And when Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. Again, why, God? Why did you wait? Why did you not show up like you thought we would? And when Jesus saw her weeping and the other people wailing with her, watch this, a deep anger began to well up in Jesus. And he was deeply troubled. And he asked him, and I imagine there's some frustration in his voice now, where have you put him? And they told him, Lord, come and see. And this right here, if anything, I believe this story, man, this shows that Jesus was fully human and fully God. Jesus wept. He wept for his friend. But you know what I also think he wept for? He wept for the fact that so many people were missing what he was trying to do. And I believe that happens so many times in our life. God is trying to move and trying to work. And Jesus, he's speaking to us. He's moving and he's working, but we miss it. We miss it because we're so hung up on why. Why, God? And he answers us, and we miss it. We miss it. We'll go back to that scripture. And the people were standing by, see how much he loved him. But some said, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't he kept Lazarus from dying? Why, God? Why, God? Jesus was still angry when he arrived at the tomb in a cave with a stone rolled across his entrance. And this is 39. He says, roll that stone aside, he told him. But Martha, she began to protest, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. I mean, she was right. He wasn't just in the desert. He was closed off in a cave that was probably baking like an oven. This dude stunk. And Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? And so they rolled the stone aside. Jesus looked up at heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. And I said it loud for the sake of all these people standing here, the sent that you will believe me. And Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, and his feet were bound in grave cloths and head cloths. See, a lot of people at this time, you think because the way they didn't mummify him, but they wrapped him up and they put all these incenses and all these kind of scents and spices on the body so they wouldn't stink as bad in that first part of decomposition. Like a lot of times you hear the grave cloths and he's like walking out like a mummy. I really think when Jesus said Lazarus come out, he was like, no, I'm just kidding. No, because he was bound up. I don't know how he got out because it's really tightly wound. And they said, loose him. And this is where I'm getting with this story. Oftentimes we read something like this. Yes, Jesus can speak. He is the resurrection and life. And we think it's about this life. We think it's about the physical body that we have, that Jesus conquered that death. And yes, he did. But what I really believe with all my heart, Jesus is trying to show us here, is he said, I came back to resurrect some of you who didn't believe. I came to resurrect some spiritually dead, because Lazarus may have been dead in the person, but what's the greater tragedy? That someone died in the Lord, or that their faith was dead? From why to what? Because what happens in this moment produces a chapter 12 for the sister Mary. Remember how in the beginning it talked about this was the Mary that would anoint Jesus' feet? In this moment, I believe something snaps in Mary. And she believes and sees, because she spent what would have been a year's worth of wages and went to Jesus' feet and anoint him like the scripture said would happen. She fulfilled a greater purpose of what? When she got off her why. Now, how does that apply to you and me? I think this year has been a why for a lot of people. Why COVID? Why this? Why that? I'm not going to dive into politics. So why is our country in the state is, and why are we such at war with each other as people? Why has it been so hard to facilitate church? Why has it been so hard to work? Why are all these things? People have lost jobs. People have lost family members. People have lost all these things. And we are 4 days away from a new year. And some of us in this place are ready to bury this year in our memory and burn it out of existence. But God doesn't waste time. You and I we have one thing in common. We have 24 hours a day. And that's all that we have. God is trying to redeem some of this time this year, because some of us have been caught up so much in the why that we're going to miss what God was trying to show us, what purpose God was trying to lead us to, what God was trying to reveal of who his nature is. Some of you haven't known God as a provider yet. Some of you try to figure it all out on your own. I'm talking to myself here. But God is trying to show you that I can provide. I can be the way where there is no way. Some of you has lost family members this year. Some of you have suffered through COVID yourself. Some of you have it's sicknesses of other sorts and other things, because COVID's not the only disease out there. There's cancer. There's so many other things. Some of you has suffered at sickness's hand, and you wonder why. But God's trying to show you a what through it. God's trying to show you, that either he's a healer, or hey, there's a group of people who don't have faith, who are in this same circumstance and you are, but you have a life inside of you that cannot be killed. When you get baptized in the Spirit and you receive the gift of the Spirit, the Bible calls it a river of living water. Some of us around us are, God, we have walked into situations by our own choosing or by other people's bad choices. But what God is trying to say, even in that situation, I need a well. I need a river of living water. I need someone there who can speak life and life more abundantly, like his word calls it. Someone who can speak hope. Some of you feel like you're in a dead-end job right now. Can I tell you, you have influence that no one else in this building has. I don't work where you work. The person next to you may not work where you work. Guess what? God has positioned you specifically for a reason, because there is a river inside of you. And you're sitting here, why, God? Why am I working this dead-end job? Why am I going through this? And God is trying to get you to say, what would you have me do, Jesus? Because so many times when we get caught up in this why, when we get caught up in this why, we miss what is God is trying to use us for. Some of you in this place, you've been hurt as a child. Some of you have memories and scars that you've tried to put past and you tried to work away and you tried everything to do, and you're saying, God, why did that happen to me? God, why did this happen? Why did this person do this? Why did this person do this? When God is trying to say, I know that happened to you and I'm sorry. I want to heal you, but I want to use those moments. I want to use those scars so you can minister to a child right now who's going through it. Come on, I'm telling you, God is speaking to somebody in this place. I came here this morning to tell you there's a greater in the what than the why. And if you would stop asking God why, and you would lift your hands and say, God, what would you have? What was this year supposed to show me? God, what are you leading me to? What would you have me to do? I may not have a lot to offer, but God, in what little I have, I want to give back to you. What would you have me to do with it? I promised my wife I wouldn't embarrass her, but I have the mic and she doesn't. But no, I'm not trying to score brownie points, but my wife has been an inspiration to me. We've only been married 3.5, almost 4 years. But the more I find out about her story and about her childhood, I'm not going to go into super detail about it, but she was born in upstate New York, and her father was a drug addict and her mother was a prostitute for drugs. And she has all these things that she went through as a child. Her parents gave her up for a welfare check and drug money. And her grandmother hired a private detective to find her. And all these things. And these are stories of what happened to her in that other place and what just the things that sick people did. I can't find a seed of bitterness in her. I can't find a seed of bitterness in her because every day when I wake up, I hear her pray, God, what can you use me for? What can you use my story for? What can you use? And I love her because I haven't heard her say, why, God? Why? And if the music team would come and get ready, I want to ask you the same thing. What's your story hiding? What's your year hiding? What's been going on in your world that you just sit when nobody else is around? Nobody else. This is your private time. This is you and God. What are the things that you ask God why about? And I wonder what would happen if you would turn around and say, God, what? What am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to do? What person am I supposed to reach through this? What are you leading me to? And watch what would happen. Because why keeps us stationary, but what keeps us moving? And I'm going to serve him in my waiting. I'm not perfect. I'm not healed from everything. But it's in the movement towards him. Because every time I say, what, God? He says, come a little closer. I can lead you to this. And I can show you how to do this, and I can show you the person to reach. And what happens is we think we're just accomplishing the will of God here on earth. But what's happening is God is accomplishing something as us because he's pulling us closer. And every step that we take closer to him, those scales begin to fall off, and those wounds and those pains as we get closer in the presence of Jesus, he begins to bind them up. And before we know it, the thing we were questioning why about that was the pain in our life is just a scar, and it's a memory. And it's like, did that ever happen?
because I don't feel the sting and the pain when I talk about it. It's the goodness of God that I was brought from that. It's the goodness of God that I was delivered from that I was healed and I was freed and I was made whole. And as we stand across this place this morning, I don't know who it is in this house. I don't know who this word was for today, but I'm here to tell you that God is in the business of bringing dead things back to life. If you thought your faith was dead, if you thought your family life was dead, if you thought your marriage was dead, if you thought this year is dead, if you thought your job was dead, your financial situation, your relationship with your children, whatever it is, whatever you've been asking God why for, listen to this young man this morning. God is trying to direct you to a what? God is trying to direct you to something so much more. And if you can take this morning, however that is, maybe this be your first time with Jesus, your first encounter, if that's a moment of repentance, if that's being filled with the Spirit, if that's you just stepping out and lifting your hands and saying, God, I can't do life like this anymore. I can't keep asking why. All I ask this morning is you take a step. Because when you take a step towards Jesus, he comes running. And the earthly meets the divine, and there's this impact, and nothing is ever the same again. If you ever have had an encounter with Jesus before, you're witness to it. Once you encounter Jesus, your life will never, ever, ever be the same. And so this morning, I want to ask you, if that's you, would you mind stepping up here? We're gonna come together. We're gonna pray. We're gonna have an altar call, and it's not gonna be anything scary. It's not gonna be anything. Nobody's gonna come up here and lay their hands on your head, shake you, not pour oil over you, nothing that weird stuff. We want to join together, and we want to pray with you, and we want to partner with you, and we want to join together and say, you know what, my friend is taking a step, and I want to be there for him, and I want to pray with them, and I want to lift him up. The worship team is gonna worship, and they're gonna lead us in worship, and we're just gonna seek God. Can we do that for a minute? Can we do that for a minute? Make it personal right now. Jesus, we thank you so much for what you're doing in this place. We thank you that you're healing us and you're freeing us and you're delivering us and you're making us new.